Good morning, Chair. This morning, the inquiry will hear from Miss Dawn Lowe, the undercover reporter from the Dispatches documentary, Hospital Undercover, Are Our Wards Safe? She will be giving evidence about her observations whilst working undercover as a healthcare assistant during a 2-month period between the 5th of April and to the 8th of June 2022. She will talk about her experiences whilst working shifts at the Willow Ward, Rochford Hospital, the Mental Health Urgent Care Department in Basildon Hospital, the Cherrydown Ward in Basildon Mental Health Unit, and the Gallywood Ward at the Linden Centre. This afternoon, we will hear from Mr. Ian Arthur. He is a registered mental health nurse and is currently seconded to the Mid and South Essex NHS Foundation Trust, working as the Integrated Discharge Hub Mental Health Lead. His previous experience includes working at various managerial levels on older adult wards, dementia care wards during various periods from 2018 to October 2023. He was also responsible for the Peter Brough unit. Before we hear any evidence, and as with previous days, Chair, there may be aspects of today's evidence that are difficult to listen to. And for some, it may not be possible to sit through the sessions. Anyone in the inquiry room should feel free to leave at any time. May I take this opportunity to remind those engaging with the inquiry that emotional support is available to anyone who requires it. Present here again today, as with other days, are members of our emotional support staff from Hestia, an experienced provider of emotional support at these types of hearings. They are currently in this room and can be identified by their orange-coloured scarves. There is a private room downstairs where anyone who needs emotional support can talk to Hestia support staff. If you prefer, you can talk to a member of the inquiry team and we will put you in touch with the emotional support staff. We are all wearing purple-coloured lanyards. For those following the hearing online, information about the emotional support that is available can be found on the Lampard Inquiry website at lampardinquiry.org.uk. The support tab is near the top right-hand corner. We want everyone engaging with this inquiry in whatever way to feel safe and supported. Thank you, Chair. We are ready to hear from our first witness this morning, who is already sitting here. Could I ask that the witness be sworn, please?
I, Dawn Lowe, swear by Almighty God that the evidence I shall give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Thank you. You've provided a witness statement to the inquiry dated the 28th of May of this year. Have you had an opportunity to read it recently?
Yes, I have.
And do you have any corrections that you wish to make to your statement?
Yes, I do.
And what are those corrections, please?
I would just like to correct 2 of the dates contained within my statement. Shift 11 should read a shift on Cherrydown Ward on the 28th of May 2022, and my last shift at Willow Ward was on the 9th of June 2022 rather than the 8th.
Thank you very much. Aside from those corrections, can you confirm that the contents of your statement are true?
Yes, they are.
Now, you were the undercover reporter in the Channel 4 Dispatches documentary produced by Harbour 8 called Hospital Undercover, Are Our Wards Safe? Is that right?
That's correct.
And the documentary aired on the 10th of October 2022, is that correct?
That's correct.
And you undertook shifts as an undercover bank healthcare assistant during a 2-month period, which you've now corrected the 5th of April 2022 to the 9th of June 2022. Is that right?
That's right.
You worked a total of 13 shifts across 4 wards, 9 shifts at the Willow ward in Rochford Hospital, 1 shift at the Mental Health Urgent Care Department in Basildon Hospital, 2 shifts at the Cherrydown ward in Basildon Mental Health Unit, and 1 shift at the Gallywood ward, Linden Centre. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And from your witness statement, we can see that you worked on the Willow ward on the following dates. So the first shift was on the 5th of April, the second shift was on the 6th of April, third shift on the 12th, the fourth shift on the 16th, the fifth shift on the 19th, the sixth shift on the 20th, shift 7 was on the 25th, shift 8 was on the 27th of April. Those were all April 2022, with the last shift that you've just mentioned, the 9th of June 2022. Is that right?
That's right.
You worked, as we say, 1 shift on the Mental Health Urgent Care Department on the 17th of May 22. Does that sound right to you?
Yes.
And just about the Mental Health Urgent Care Department, was there a specific name of the ward, or can you give us any information about what that was?
I can't remember whether it had a name. It may well have done, but I can't remember that.
What type of unit was it? The urgent care department.
From memory, it was a ward where if someone had been sectioned by the hospital or by other agencies, they would go on to that ward where they would be assessed.
So an assessment unit.
I believe so, yes.
And then 1 shift on the Cherrydown ward on the 20th of May 2022. Is that right?
That's correct.
And then a second shift, can you recall when that shift was?
That was the 28th of May.
And then again 2022.
2022, sorry, yes.
And then 1 shift on the Gallywood ward on the 1st of June 2022. Is that so?
That's correct, yes.
So a total of 13 shifts. And I'd like to ask you about the length of those shifts. Each shift was 12.5 hours, is that right?
That's correct, yes.
So were all the 13 shifts that you worked 12.5 hours?
Yes, they were.
So by my calculation, that's 162.5 hours working within the mental health, the 4 wards that we've already mentioned at EPUT. Does that sound right to you?
That sounds about right, yes.
Prior to working as a healthcare assistant for those 13 shifts, did you have any experience of working in healthcare?
No, I didn't.
Have you gained any experience of working in healthcare since?
No, I haven't.
Do you have any clinical, nursing or mental health professional background?
No, I don't.
Is the extent of your experience working in mental health for those 13 shifts?
That is correct, yes.
And so that's the prism within which we view your evidence. Would that be right?
That's correct, yes.
What's your motivation for giving evidence to this inquiry today?
I think it's important. One of the reasons that I worked undercover within EPUT was to hopefully get this inquiry onto a statutory footing. And I think it's important to bring to life my experiences whilst working within those wards. Obviously, I was independent, if you like, of the trust, and I just think it's important to bring to life my experiences.
You say in your witness statement, I wonder if we could have this up on the screen, please, page 22, paragraph 72. During my time with EPUT, I would say it was one of the most difficult jobs I have ever done. There is no consistency across the wards, a severe lack of leadership and support for the staff members, and an environment that is absolute chaos. I would say that for things to improve significantly, there needs to be an overhaul of the way wards are run. Does that fairly summarise your experience across the 13 shifts on those 4 wards?
Yes, it does. That is my opinion, obviously based on the 13 shifts working on those wards.
Can I ask you, before you took up the role of working as an HCA, had you been aware of the issues with EPUT and the calls for a statutory inquiry?
Yes, I was.
Oh, thank you. I have a number of topics that I would like to explore with you this morning. One of those is your recruitment experience to become a healthcare assistant. Perhaps if we could have up page 1, paragraph 4 of your statement, please. You describe here in your witness statement it being a lengthy and frustrating one. And you go on to say it was extremely difficult to make contact with the recruitment department. The phone was rarely answered, but when it was, I was told on more than one occasion that staff were working from home. I was instructed to communicate via email. It could take days for me to receive a response to email inquiries, and I had to send numerous follow-up emails to prompt a response. Can you remember when you first made contact?
I can't remember the date of when I first made contact, but it would have been around probably the beginning of September. I can't remember the exact date.
And who did you contact? For example, was it EPUT directly or was it an agency?
No, it was EPUT directly.
Approximately how many times did you need to telephone or email?
It was a daily thing, because obviously I was keen to become a bank staff member. So it was a daily thing, to the point that on one occasion, and I can't remember the date, I actually drove to the recruitment centre in Grays, and there was a notice hoping to speak to somebody, but there was no one there. There was a notice on the door saying for inquiries ring the number I'd been calling, and getting no response. Emails would take days to answer. It was a frustrating process.
You tell us in your statement, we can see it there on the screen, on the 10th of September 2021, you completed an application form which required you to fill out your personal details, work history, and provide details of your previous employment. Presumably you didn't provide any details of past employment in healthcare because you didn't have any. Is that right?
I didn't have any experience. However, I had applied to become a COVID vaccinator, but never actually performed the role, because I did the training for that, but there was never any shifts available, so I didn't actually put my training as a COVID vaccinator into practice.
And when you applied to be a healthcare assistant, what information were you given about the role before you submitted your application form?
I really can't remember.
Was there, to help jog your memory maybe, was there a job description with the experience, qualities and characteristics that were expected of a healthcare assistant?
I can't remember.
Were you given any indication of what wards you would be working on?
No.
Were you given any indication of being confined to particular wards?
No, my understanding, the role I applied for was a bank healthcare assistant within the mental health wards, within Essex Partnership Trust. So I was aware of what wards were within that area, and the mental health wards, not normal, medical wards. They were mental health environment.
And were you aware of any restrictions on working on particular wards?
No.
You say you completed a new starter pack. We can see that for those following your statement at page 2, paragraph 4. A new starter pack which required proof of address and identity. As far as you can recall, there was no eligibility criteria apart from having the COVID-19 vaccination and completing a DBS check. Was there anything in that starter pack, to the best of your recollection, about the characteristics or qualities, job description, or any restrictions on working on particular wards?
Not that I can remember.
Do you know if a DBS check was undertaken?
I assume so. I can't remember. It was 4.5 years ago. And I had a DBS check done for the COVID vaccinator role, like I said, that I'd never actually got to perform. So whether or not that kind of encapsulated that time frame, I couldn't be sure.
You say at page 2, paragraph 4, there was no interview process. And 3 months later, in December 2021, you were told that you were successful. Is that right?
That's correct, yes.
You were offered the role of a bank healthcare assistant. Did this mean that you were employed by EPUT or via an agency?
Via EPUT.
And would you describe the recruitment process as robust?
I would have thought that an interview at the very least, whether that was an online interview via Teams or some conversation would have taken place, but there was nothing of that nature. It was literally my application form, and then I was offered the job.
I'd like to ask you next about training. You explain that before you were allowed to work on the wards, you had to complete a series of online and in-person mandatory training courses. The courses had to be completed within 7 days of receiving. Was it a link in order to undertake the courses?
That's right. It was called a training tracker, and you had 7 days from receipt of the training tracker to complete the 20 online courses, some of which were quite lengthy courses.
And you say in your statement, page 2, paragraph 5, that you had to chase the training tracker by sending numerous emails and making numerous phone calls on almost a daily basis to prompt the tracker to be sent. When you say numerous emails and phone calls on almost a daily basis, can you help us with how many that might have been?
Well, it would have been a phone call or an email a day, because obviously I was aware that in order to get on the TASI course, which was the 5-day in-person course, I needed to complete the online training before I was allocated a slot on the 5-day course. So I was keen to get those under my belt so that I could then book myself on for the TASI course.
So was this chasing emails, as you describe, or calls over the course of a week or weeks or months? Can you help us at all?
Well, it was from the day that I found out that I'd been accepted, which I can't remember the date of that, that I'd got the job, to actually receiving the email. So, you know, most of January I was chasing that because I was keen to complete them, like I say, so that I could then book myself on the TASI course.
So I think if it helps you at all, you were told that you were successful in December of 2021, and then you were sent the information, the training tracker, on the 24th of January 2022, based on what you say in your statement. So would it have been for most of January, or?
Yes, it was from, you know, the 1st of January or 2nd of January, obviously the bank holiday, up until receiving it. I was chasing it daily.
And once you did receive that information, you received 20 online training courses, which you completed, is that right?
That's correct.
And we can see a list of those at page 2 to 3, paragraph 6 of your witness statement. Can you recall how long each of those training courses were?
They all varied from, I think, some were 30 minutes long to an hour and a half, 2 hours. But there was, on some of them, not necessarily all of them, there was like a test at the end that you had to get a pass mark on, but I couldn't tell you which ones the test applied to. So obviously you had to complete that and pass it, or redo it again if you failed it.
So some of them were assessed, not all of them?
Some of them, yeah, from memory, some were assessed, not all.
I'll return to that in a moment. Just help us with whether they were NHS branded online training courses or EPUT training courses.
I can't remember that.
And what was the format of the training, to the best of your recollection? So, for example, was it reading a text or watching a video and then answering some questions?
So they were reading text, there would be short videos on some of them, and then at the end of the course on some of them there would be a knowledge checker, presumably to make sure that you've taken on board the lesson that you've just read. So it was a mix and match of like I say, text and videos and pictures of you know, items. For example, the ligature cutters, there would be photographs of the different ligature cutters from memory.
Okay. Well, we'll come on to that in a moment. You may not be able to recall, appreciating it was some time ago now, but the training that we can see, I think it's at page 2, of dementia awareness. Can you help us with what that covered?
I really can't remember, I'm sorry.
Can you recall whether you thought at the time it was a helpful course or not?
I did think it was helpful. I mean, it kind of explains dementia. I have experience of dementia in my private life, but it obviously puts it educates you more on actually how behaviours can differ with the different degrees of dementia.
The inquiry heard some evidence yesterday about diabetes, and you undertook diabetes level 1 training. Can you help us at all, to the best of your recollection, what that training covered?
I can't. I'm not trying to be obstructive. I really just can't remember what the content of that was.
Can you remember at the time thinking that it was a helpful course?
I remember thinking it was helpful, but I can't remember exactly the content of the course.
And what about the Mental Health Act for non-registered staff? Can you recall anything about that?
I think that was legislation based, and that's all I could say about that. I can't really remember any other of the content, just more the legislation to do with the powers to section someone.
I see.
But as to any more detail, I couldn't be specific.
And then we can see at page 3, again, paragraph 6 of your statement, reference to engagement and supportive observation. Was that therapeutic engagement and supportive observation, or was it, as per your witness statement, engagement and supportive observation?
I believe it was as my statement, engagement and supportive observation. That was the title of the course.
So it didn't include the word therapeutic engagement?
Not from memory, no.
What were you told about the purpose of observations during that course? Can you remember?
No, I can't remember.
And was it explained how observations should be undertaken?
I really can't remember.
Did it say anything about how observations should be recorded?
I can't remember that either.
Did the course provide you with any specific training on how to engage with patients during observations?
I can't remember whether that course covered it, but it was covered, I believe, during the TASI training, the 5-day course that I did in person.
Okay, we'll come on to the TASI training in a moment. Can you recall if it included, and you may not be able to remember, and that's absolutely fine, but whether there was anything about engaging with patients safely who were on one-to-one observations?
I really can't remember.
Okay. What did you understand therapeutic engagement to mean following this course?
I can't specifically say what I remember from doing that particular course, but at what point I thought this was, it could have been after I completed the TASI training, or it could have been after I completed that course combined with the TASI training. But my idea of it was to supervise, to engage with and observe and prevent any self-harm to any of the patients. What I saw when I worked on the wards was not that. It was members of staff just sitting, not engaging with patients, which for me I found quite difficult, because if that's not how it should have been done, but equally, how would anyone feel if someone was just sat staring at them for hours on end without engaging or interacting with them?
So was there a disconnect between what you understood would happen and what you observed when you went on the wards?
Absolutely, yes.
To be clear, you considered after your training that you would be interacting with patients.
That's correct, yes.
Now, you say that wasn't what you observed. Was that across all the 13 shifts, all members of staff that you observed, or are we talking about a small selection?
I would say that it wasn't all the members of staff, but I would say that across the 13 shifts I did see on every shift members of staff not engaging with patients. As my statement says, I saw members of staff fall asleep, members of staff using their mobile phones, members of staff talking amongst themselves in another language, which was upsetting to the patient that they were supposed to be observing. And I know it was my training, but also I think it's common sense that if you're sitting looking after somebody, basically, to put it bluntly, then why would you not want to engage with that person?
Well, we'll come back to the observations that you observed on the ward. I wonder if, just going back to the training for a moment, whether the course that you undertook, so part of the online course, the engagement and supportive observation, whether that included anything on policy documents, supportive observations and therapeutic engagement, or any sort of standard operating procedures, anything like that?
I don't recall being shown anything like that.
And what about the Oxyvision system? Was that covered in the online courses?
No.
You then mention make every contact count, physical health screening. Can you help us whether that training included how to identify whether a patient's physical health was deteriorating?
I can't remember. I'm sorry.
And I think it probably follows from that you're not able to say what signs, whether the training included signs to look out for to identify if a patient was deteriorating.
I can't say whether that training specifically included that, no.
And if I was to mention National Early Warning Score 2, does that ring any bells from that initial online training?
No, I've heard it, but not from the training.
You say you've heard of it. Is that from subsequent training that you attended?
No, I heard people talking about that when I was on the ward, but it didn't mean anything to me.
And when you say you heard people talking about it, was that other healthcare assistants or nursing staff or doctors?
I can't remember whom it was, staff members, whether it was a doctor, well, probably not a doctor because I don't think I had any interactions with a doctor. So it was either a nurse or a healthcare assistant.
But that didn't sort of register with you? You didn't understand the significance of that? Okay. I want to ask you about the preventing suicide by ligature training. Can you recall whether this training included how to respond to a ligature incident?
I can't remember.
And safeguarding adults and children level 2, including mental capacity, deprivation of liberty and prevent. Can you recall whether you were given any information about safeguarding in that course?
There was information on safeguarding, yes. As to the extent of it, I can't recall that.
Okay. Well, let's see if we can help jog your memory at all. Did the training include how to recognise signs that a patient might be exploited or abused?
I can't remember. I really can't. This makes me sound really bad. I'm not being helpful at all at the moment, but I am trying to be.
Can you remember whether the training included sexual safety risks that a patient might face?
I really can't tell you what that training, what it contained. The only thing I do remember about it is to do with the dolls, and that's something that registers, and that's the deprivation of liberty. So that's the only thing I can really remember from that.
And is there anything specific that you can remember, or
just that could be something that is implemented with a patient, but as to I can't tell you what was in the training.
And so you mentioned earlier that there was also the suicide awareness course, just out of completeness, can you remember anything about what that course covered?
I can't remember the detail of it. Obviously, working in the environment I was about to work in, it would, I suppose the title says it all, but I can't remember the content.
Okay. Now, you mentioned earlier that the courses were assessed. Can you recall how they were assessed?
Those online courses, you were given questions, obviously from the content of the training, and then answer the questions, and then it had been marked at the end, and then if you didn't get the correct score, then you had to resit the test until you passed it.
Do you know what the pass mark was?
I can't. It was around 80%, but I think it differed on each of the courses.
So they were all assessed, or some of them were assessed?
Some of them were assessed.
Some were. Okay.
Yeah, but I can't tell you which ones.
And did you feel that these online courses prepared you well for working as a healthcare assistant on a mental health ward?
I think they were quite comprehensive, but at the time I was undertaking the training, I really wasn't aware of what kind of would be expected of me when I went to work on the wards. Okay. I think that was kind of made clearer when I completed the TASI course.
Just before we come on to the TASI course, you did also attend 3 in-person courses that you talk about in your statement, page 3, paragraph 7, for those following: moving and handling face-to-face training, grab bag training, and basic life support training. Were all of those 3 courses, were they assessed? Can you remember?
I think they were just, if you completed them to an adequate standard, then you'd completed them. I'm not aware of any assessment per se, but I think it was just a case of, obviously, if you weren't paying attention or you weren't performing the basic life support correctly, I mean, I don't know what would have happened. Probably you wouldn't have passed it, but I can't be sure.
Okay. So you had to pass them adequately. Do you know how that was measured?
No.
Okay. And were they theory or practical based?
They were practical based. They were in person in Rochford Hospital, like the training unit there.
Okay. And was it an external provider or EPUT employees who undertook?
I believe it was EPUT employees.
And would you know if they were members of the clinical staff?
I have no idea.
What would you be able to help us with their role or their seniority?
I have no idea.
And did you feel that the course, for example, moving and handling, prepared you well for moving and handling patients whilst working as a healthcare assistant on a mental health ward?
The moving and handling was, I believe, was more geared towards if you were working with elderly or physically disabled people, because it was how to use the chairs that put people into the bath and get people out of bed and out of chairs, which obviously may happen on a mental health ward, but I didn't experience that, so it was useful.
I'd like to ask you next about the grab bag training. Can you remember whether you did the grab bag training first before the basic life support training? Or was it as your statement, the basic life support training was the last one?
I believe the basic life support training was the last one.
And so the grab bag training contained, you say in your statement, this is page 3, paragraph 7, contained ligature cutters, other items that might be needed in an emergency. And the training focused on the use of oxygen and CPR and the use of a defibrillator. Was the training specific to working on a mental health ward?
I think it was.
Was it explained in what instances or scenarios a grab bag would be required?
Because the grab bag contained ligature cutters, then my understanding is that grab bag was for the mental health wards, for if anybody attempted to ligature.
And do you remember whether the bag included equipment that could be inserted into a patient's airway to help with their breathing?
I can't remember whether that was in the grab bag or whether that would have been in a first aid kit. No.
And what about equipment such as a suction machine or a device that could be used to remove items from the patient's mouth? Can you recall that?
I can't recall that, but it may well have included that.
Were you given training on how to use each item in the grab bag?
I was given training on how to use the ligature cutters. As for the airway suction thing, if there was indeed one in there, I don't remember being trained on that.
Okay. And just help us then whether this was practical or theory based. So as in, what I mean by that is, did you actually practice using the items? Same for the moving and handling, you said that it was practical. Does that mean you practiced the techniques and the trainer was there to sort of help you?
I don't remember the grab bag training being practical. It may have been, but I don't remember that. And the reason I say that is the ligature cutters are one use only, so I only imagine if they went through the training and were using a ligature knife to practice on, they have to be discarded after a use. So I don't remember it. It might have been demonstrated, but I really can't remember.
Okay. Can I ask, did the training include CPR training?
Yes.
Did it include the use of oxygen cylinders?
Yes, it did.
Use of defibrillators?
Yes.
And was that practiced
Yes,
on a dummy, for example?
It was, yes.
And was that delivered by EPUT staff or an external provider? Can you remember?
I believe it was EPUT staff.
And did you feel that the course prepared you well for identifying when a grab bag would be required and how to use the contents of it?
I believe so, yes.
And was your technique that you used observed? Were you given any feedback?
Not that I recall, no.
And at the end of the 4-hour training session, how confident were you with using the emergency medical equipment?
I felt quite confident.
And then finally, the in-person basic life support training. You say at this is page 3, paragraph 7, that the training included the use of defibrillators. Was this different to the grab bag training?
Yes, I think the basic life support training also included use of defibrillators. I suspect the basic life support training is given to all EPUT staff, healthcare assistants, but obviously the grab bag, like I said earlier, is probably more for the mental health, or so it was covered in both sessions.
And again, was this a practical course? Did you practice on a dummy, for example?
Yes.
Were you given feedback on your technique?
I just remember them walking around while we were practicing the CPR on the dummy and the use of the defibrillators. Obviously, they've got training ones to practice on.
And did it include specific scenarios for a mental health unit, such as a ligature emergency or an overdose?
Not as far as I remember, no.
And was it assessed?
Well, like I say, I think the members of staff were walking around and checking that you were doing it correctly, but there wasn't, as far as I'm aware, an assessment per se.
Can you recall what checks you were told to make on an unresponsive patient before starting CPR?
Well, it's your Dr. ABC, which is the mnemonic used. So, yeah, I mean, there is a set procedure to go through.
So following the basic life support training, did you feel confident in assisting a patient who needed resuscitation if this was the only training that you'd received?
I did, yes.
On reflection, do you consider the 3 in-person training courses equipped you for the risks and the circumstances that you might encounter in your role?
I think it went some way towards it. Whether it was 100% adequate is hard to say. But I certainly felt confident that I would be able to use the ligature cutters and also perform CPR and use a defibrillator, but it's quite subjective. I've done first aid training in my private life, so it was kind of something that kind of was just a refresher for myself. Whether or not other people would be that confident, I couldn't say.
And you mention at paragraph 7, we can see here, page 3, a fire web video via Teams. Can you just explain what that was, if you can remember?
From memory, that was to do with how, like, the evacuation procedure and explaining to leave your personal belongings, and each ward, familiarise yourself with the emergency evacuation procedure on each of the wards when you go to work on them, because they're different on each ward. But apart from that, no, I can't remember anything else.
You then, after completing the online courses, doing the 3 in-person training sessions, you then undertook the Therapeutic and Safe Intervention Training, known as TASI, which you mention at paragraph 8, page 3 of your statement. It was over 5 days, delivered by NHS employees. Do you know if that was EPUT staff?
Whether they were EPUT or had come from another trust, I'm not sure, but they were certainly NHS employees.
And you mention at paragraph 8, it covered communication skills, holding techniques when required to move patients, and the use of force. And you say it was interactive. Can you help us with what you mean by interactive? Is that there was role play scenarios?
There were role play scenarios where we take it in turns to be the patient, and then the other members of the course would practice techniques on us as individuals, and on some occasions on the trainers as well.
And you say at paragraph 8, it was a good course that covered many aspects of the role. What other aspects, if you can remember, did it cover?
There was lots of... I can't be specific on what other things it covered, but it was a very good course. And the other thing I got from the course was being able to listen to people who were working on other wards within EPUT, listening to the experiences of the trainers who were experienced mental health workers, healthcare assistants, and also listening to the various anecdotes and stories of situations that had happened, the experiences of these people, which bring the training more into life, and you can understand why the training was as comprehensive as it was, because of the different situations that had arisen over the years.
And so, can you help us with whether that was an assessed course?
Yes, it was assessed.
Was there feedback from trainers?
Yes, we had to complete, every day we had to complete a sheet, a booklet, and there were during the week there at the end of every day, I think you had to write up your thoughts. From memory, there were certain questions on parts of the course, and then at the end there was a final assessment. It wasn't a given that you'd complete the course and that was that.
Okay. Is there anything in the training that would have better prepared you for your role?
Sorry, I can't think of anything. I did think it was very comprehensive. Short of actually performing the role, I thought it really gave you the skills to be able to deal with de-escalation, deal with somebody who may be ligaturing or self-harming in some way. I did think it was a good course.
You mentioned conversations. I just want to ask you a bit about those conversations before we take a break. You say, this is at page 3, paragraph 8, there were conversations during the training between the students and the staff on how under-resourced EPUT is. Could you give any more context for that conversation? For example, can you recall how that topic came up, what was said, who was saying it?
So the course had members of staff on there who, like I say, were working across various EPUT wards. There was a guy on the course who worked for the health and safety part of EPUT, and he said that he had to attend the course because they have to go into all the wards every 6 months to look out for ligature points. And obviously, if they're working on the ward, something might happen and they might need to use some of the techniques that we were trained. But the sense I got from everyone, including the trainers, was that EPUT was under-resourced. There weren't enough EPUT healthcare assistants, and the reliance was very much on the agency staff, which I found to be true when I went to work on the wards. It was a topic of conversation that was mentioned on a daily basis.
You say, and we can see this at paragraph 8, that all of them, apart from one of the people being trained, had been working on various mental health wards prior to completing the training. Can you explain what you mean by that?
So when I was given the role of the bank healthcare assistant, I was told that I wasn't allowed to work on any of the wards until I'd completed the online training, the 3 face-to-face trainings, the grab bag, basic life support, and the TASI training. However, there was a girl, a healthcare assistant, who was on the TASI training, who was working on Willow Ward. And she'd been working on Willow Ward some months and was on the same TASI course as me. So she'd been allowed to work on the ward without completing the TASI course. And that was, I think I was the only person who wasn't actually working. The rest of them were working on wards within EPUT, yet they were just doing the TASI training that I was doing.
And so was it your impression from conversations that you had with them that was the first time that they were undertaking the TASI course?
It was the first time. They were new employees, newish employees.
And so you heard directly from them that they had been working on wards without the training?
Yes, and one of the girls, one of the healthcare assistants that was on my TASI training was working on Willow Ward, and I subsequently worked with her after the TASI training on Willow Ward. there was another healthcare assistant who was working on Willow Ward, who had previously been on another mental health ward, and she hadn't completed the TASI training.
You mentioned agency staff, agency healthcare assistants before. Can you help us with, in your experience, whether agency healthcare assistants had undertaken the TASI course or the 20 online courses and the 3 in-person courses that you attended? Would they have done the same training?
No, I know that they hadn't done the same training because whilst I was waiting to hear back from EPUT between September and December, I had made inquiries to work potentially as an agency member of staff, and that required something called, I think it was a PMVA course and a couple of online courses that you had to pay for yourself. Now, I actually did the PMVA course, which was a 2-day course, and didn't even, didn't have half the things in it that the TASI course had. That was a course that apparently, to work as an agency member of staff on a mental health ward, had to be completed. Then the other issue then for me, trying to get employed as an agency member of staff, was I had to have experience of working on a mental health ward, which obviously I didn't have, but there's going to be a first time for everybody. So it was PMVA and then experience of working on a mental health ward were the criteria there.
And you mention paragraph 8 again. It was mentioned that some of the techniques used by the agency staff are not correct, specifically the fact that the use of force they adopt on the legs by grabbing the ankles is not correct and can be dangerous to the staff and to patients. Was that said in the context of a particular incident that was referred to, or was it a general comment? Can you help us?
From memory, it was a general comment, but having experienced the training on the PMVA course, which, like I say, was 2 days, I saw, a completely different model of techniques, if you like, that were being taught to the healthcare assistants, the agency healthcare assistants.
I see. And help us then about the incorrect techniques that you heard about during the TASI course, whether anything was said about actions taken to address any of those concerns that were mentioned.
No, I don't remember any conversations on actions, because as I was later to find out, the wards are heavily reliant on the agency staff. Without them, then the wards just wouldn't be able to function.
I'd like to just ask you at paragraph 9, page 4, about Datix. You say that there were conversations that it appeared not to be completed when it should be. The use of the Datix appeared to be sporadic and inconsistent. Can you help us with the context for how that conversation came about?
Sorry, is this within the TASI?
Yeah, during the TASI.
Yeah. I think that it was trying to educate us on the fact that Datex needs to be completed, and it currently isn't being completed correctly. And I knew from research that I'd done prior to going into the TASI environment that this was something that was criticised. I don't know whether it was by the CQC, but there was a big void where the Datex wasn't being completed at all or correctly, or didn't have enough information in it, and that was borne out in the training, the TASI training, that they said it's not been utilised correctly, and that was my observation when I went to work on the wards.
Okay, and we'll come on to that. But just in terms of the TASI training, had you received training on serious incident reporting and use of the DATEX system?
No. I think from memory, it was very much once you get to your place of work, you will be shown how to complete this. You needed to have an NHS account to complete it, and it was very much left to the individual wards to ensure that they trained you on it. Or
I see. And did you have any awareness of whose responsibility it would be to complete a DATEX?
I was under the impression that it was the person that had utilised force or had applied the intervention, that it was their responsibility.
Okay. Do you think the training could have been improved by the inclusion of DATEX and record keeping and how to access the computer system?
I don't think that the TASI training was the forum for that, because the TASI training was very much geared towards safely intervening, physically intervening, should the necessity arise. The DATEX was more of an administration role that I think could have been covered in one of the other online courses, or potentially, one of the face-to-face courses. So yeah, I don't think the TASI training would have been the right forum for that.
And you mentioned absconsion was covered. Do you know were you told about what you should do in the event of absconsion?
There was mention of the absconsion. If they leave the grounds of the hospital, you're not to pursue them. That was touched on. And then I obviously, as my statement goes on to explain, I actually experienced that on one of my shifts, someone absconding. And was again told I wasn't allowed to pursue them outside the perimeter of, the ward area, really.
Not even to keep them within eyesight, for example?
That's right.
And what reason were you given for that?
A health and safety reason, I think.
And you mentioned earlier about ligatures, and was the risk of ligatures discussed, how risk is mitigated?
Yes.
Were risk items identified in the course?
As far as I remember, they were.
And was de-escalation discussed?
Yes, it was.
Was there anything in the training about treating patients with dignity and respect?
Yes, they were. The trainers were very, in my opinion, were very good. They were, we're dealing with human beings here that need to be dealt with courtesy and respect, and I think that came across in the training. And the de-escalation was, they made it quite clear that de-escalation should be the primary way of dealing with a patient, and use of force is the last response. It's about talking, communicating to individuals rather than laying hands on to try and deal with the situation in front of you.
What about desensitisation of staff? Can you remember that being mentioned?
I don't remember that being mentioned.
What about compassion fatigue? Is that something that was mentioned?
That term doesn't resonate.
Okay. And what about caring for those using substances, illicit or otherwise?
I don't remember that.
And what about caring for those diagnosed with emotionally unstable personality disorder or borderline personality disorders? Was anything discussed about that?
I think the behaviours that may be demonstrated was discussed, but I don't. It's not something that springs to mind.
What about neurodiversity, such as those with autism or learning difficulties? Did the training touch upon that?
I can't remember that it did. No.
What about caring for those with comorbidities, such as diabetes or heart conditions? Can you remember that being touched?
I can't.
What about anything said about allied health professionals, so physiotherapists, speech and language team, occupational therapists?
No.
Was anything said about when to escalate any concerns about a patient?
I think that was discussed regarding the kind of the chain of command, really. The healthcare assistants are the bottom rung of the ladder, and obviously you've got the nurses and doctors above you. I think obviously it was explained that should you have any concerns with a patient, you need to escalate those concerns, not just ignore them or keep them to yourself.
So was it clear to you, or was it explained to you how they should be escalated, where it should be documented, for example?
I can't remember that specifically that it was explained to me or documented, but I just think it would, should I say, common sense that if you've got an issue, you take it to someone who's got more experience than yourself. But I don't really remember them focusing on that specifically.
And at paragraph 10, this is page 4 of your statement, you say that the training wasn't required to be undertaken by agency staff. Based on your experience, did you consider that it would be helpful for agency staff to have undertaken that training?
100%, yes.
Thank you very much. I've got no further questions for you now. We're going to take a break for 15 minutes.
15 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to ask you about your first shift on the Willow ward. You describe it, for those following your witness statement, page 5, paragraph 14, just for reminding everyone, the Willow ward in Rochford Hospital, a female-only ward with a capacity, you say, of 19 to 20 patients. Your first shift was on the 5th of April of 2022. Did you pick this ward, or was it assigned to you?
No, I picked it.
Was there a particular reason that you picked it?
I think it was because it was the first available shift. So as a bank staff member, basically, I would go onto an app or a website, and there would be shifts would be basically published for where they needed vacancies filled. So as a member of bank staff, that was a 0 hours contract, so you didn't have to work if you didn't want to. So from memory, that was the first available shift that I could take after I'd completed my TASI training.
I'd like to ask you about some aspects of that first shift and how that translated into what you saw later throughout the 9 shifts that you undertook at the Willow ward. Starting with briefings, please, for those following your statement, page 5, paragraph 12. You say there was no briefing on emergency procedures, nor was there any information on what to do if a patient was deteriorating or in cardiac arrest. Was this the case for all 13 shifts that you undertook?
Sorry, there was a briefing at the start of every shift, but at no time was it mentioned about a patient if they were deteriorating or in cardiac arrest.
So emergency, including emergency procedures?
Yes.
So was that the same for all 13 shifts across the 4 wards?
Yes, it was.
When you started on the Willow ward, help us with whether you were shown where the grab bag was?
I was, yes.
You were shown where the ligature cutters were?
Yes, I was.
Were you shown where the automated external defibrillator was, so the AED?
Yes, I was.
Were you told how to raise the alarm in an emergency?
Yes, I was.
Were you given a personal alarm?
I can't remember whether I was given a personal alarm to start with, because the alarms, the PIN alarms, were attached to keys, and there weren't enough sets of keys to go round so that each member of staff could have a set of keys, and this keys had the PIN alarm on. Whether or not I was given that on my first shift, I don't know. And the keys used to get handed around because there weren't enough sets of keys.
I just want to explore that a little bit with you. So the personal alarm was a PIN alarm, is that right?
Yes.
And that was attached to the keys?
That's correct.
So if you didn't have a set of keys, you didn't have a personal alarm, is that right?
That's correct, yes.
So how would you, in those circumstances, raise an alarm?
Well, you'd have to shout and hope someone heard you.
You talk about there being a lack of keys that were available. There weren't enough to go around, I think you say. What, in practice, what sort of impact did that have, leaving aside the PIN alarm?
It was very frustrating. You needed the keys to get into certain areas of the ward, and also they had a PIN alarm on them, which, like you've just alluded to, if something happens, how are you supposed to alert anyone unless there's someone else in the corridor of the part of the ward that you're on that has a PIN alarm? You're literally going to have to shout or run and get help.
What about where the grab bag was kept? Would you need a set of keys to get to the grab bag?
I don't think, no, you didn't, but the grab bag was in the office, which was as you came into the ward. You know, Willow Wards was quite a big ward. You've got to go through a few sets of doors depending on which side of the ward you're on. So it's not to hand, you know, if you've got an emergency, you had to run and get it.
So the keys weren't for internal doors then?
The keys were for internal doors.
But it wouldn't have affected getting the grab bag, for example?
I don't think so, but I wouldn't like to say 100% whether that office was locked or not. It might have needed a key to get in there, but I really can't remember, to be honest with you. It was, as you went into the ward, it was where the head of the shift would sit, which I didn't really go in there, unless, of course, I did on one occasion to get the grab bag.
You can't remember needing the keys?
I didn't need the keys, I know, I didn't need the keys.
You didn't need the keys, okay. What about body-worn camera? Did you have that?
No.
Was that in use in the ward? Can you remember?
Not from memory, no.
Were you told when and how to call an ambulance?
No.
So you weren't shown the phone, for example, where you could call for an ambulance?
I was aware there was a phone in the office that I've just mentioned where the grab bag was, and there was a phone in the other office, but the other office that had the nurse in it, you needed a key to get in there.
I see. So the nursing office, you needed a key to get in. There was a phone in there.
Yeah.
And I think you say in your statement a computer. That would be in the nursing office, would it?
There was a computer in the nurse's office. There was a computer in the other office by the doors where the grab bag was, but that had the head doctor, nurse, whatever that was on duty. And you definitely needed a key to get into there, because I on occasion needed to go in there to speak to someone, and you needed a key to get in there, which was frustrating.
So that was the office, the nurse's office, but there was another office where you didn't need a key, where the grab bag was.
Well, I can't be sure whether you needed a key or not. I can't. But the only reason I say that is the day that I went. The only time I ever went into that office was the day that I needed to get the grab bag, when the healthcare assistant had taken the wrong ligature cutter, and I didn't need a key to get in there. Okay. But having said that, the head medical practitioner had left the office because I passed him on the way to get the grab bag. He'd left that office he'd been sitting in, so presumably he didn't lock it. On thinking about it.
So did you went to get the grab bag from the head medical practitioner's office, not the other office?
That's correct.
And was there a grab bag in the other office?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Right. And you are certain that the place where you got the grab bag from, you got into without a key, and can you be certain that you would, in other circumstances, not have been able to get into that office?
I can't be certain, but thinking about it now, the staff members would lock themselves in the offices to stop the patients from going in there. The only time I needed to go into the office with the grab bag was the time that the alarm had been raised, and I actually remember passing the head medical practitioner on his way to the room that the incident was happening on. I went past him as I was going back to his office, so he would presumably have left the door open, but I'd never really thought about it, to be honest.
Okay. And just on emergency procedures, were you told how to direct an attending ambulance crew to the scene of an emergency, for example?
No.
Were you told where the fire exits were?
Yes.
In terms of the briefing that you received on that first day, on the 5th of April, would you say it was a helpful induction or a helpful briefing?
Yes, it was.
Did it prepare you for the shift ahead?
Well, I felt that I'd familiarised myself with the layout of the ward. Whether it had prepared me for what was to unfold, I'm not really sure. But at least I knew where the grab bag was, because I needed, as my statement suggests, I needed to go and get the grab bag after the wrong ligature cutter was taken to the room. So had I not been given that induction, I would have not known where it was.
And so is that why you say it was a helpful induction?
Yes.
Because you were told where the grab bag
yes.
was? Okay. I wonder, we can see for those following your statement, page 5, paragraph 14, there was a briefing by the nurse on duty where information from the previous shift was relayed. Can you recall the level of detail that was provided?
So, generally, when we had the briefings at the start of the shift, it wouldn't take the patients patient by patient and give you a rundown. It was very much patient in room 5 has done this, patient in room 6 has done that. It would only be a general synopsis of the evening's events.
I see. So would there be a discussion about a patient's symptoms or their needs?
If something had happened overnight, there may be a conversation. They may say one of the patients has got to go here or got to go to, say, Basildon Hospital. A patient's got an appointment at Southend Hospital. There will be an ambulance coming to collect them at such and such a time. But there was no... This is the thing that I found most frustrating, was you're there to care for 19 to 20 ladies and you know nothing about them until you're told to go. In my case, my first shift, I was told to go and sit on a one-to-one with a patient. No one asked me if I knew what I was doing. No one told me anything about the patient. I was just given a room number and told to go around there. You need to get around there because the night duty needs to get home. That's really the level of information, if you like, that I was given.
So can I take it from what you're saying then that you weren't told about risks or triggers for each patient? Any information about safeguarding risks, was that shared?
No.
What was your understanding of the importance or the relevance of staff knowing about individual patient risk profile before conducting observations?
It's fundamental to your engagement with the patient, in my opinion. There were a couple of incidents that highlighted how important these things are. The assumption was that if you, on my part, was that if I was going on a one-to-one or a two-to-one, that was because that patient was at risk of self-harm. No other risk. And as my statement points out, there were several incidents where I found out more from the patients than I did from the staff. And I had to go about it in a very gentle way because, you know, I was concerned that by, for want of a better word, questioning someone on why they were there might trigger them. But you need to understand the person to be able to engage with them and support them in that hour or however long you're sat with them.
So you tell us that you were put on one-to-one observations with a patient at risk of self-harm. If that information wasn't given to you at the briefing, how did you know that that patient was at risk of self-harm?
Well, it was an assumption, really. The assumption being that throughout the training, the training suggested that people that were put on one-to-one or two-to-one observations were put on those observations because they were a risk to themselves.
You say, and perhaps we can bring this up, pages 7 to 8, paragraph 20. You describe a situation here where I was on a 2-to-1 with a patient who you were attempting to talk to. It had not been brought to your attention that the patient was in fact deaf. How did that make you feel undertaking observations on a patient with whom you had no idea that they were deaf?
Well, I could not believe that I've not been told this. The patient was asleep for much of my interaction, but when she was awake, I was trying to engage with her. And I think it was the next time I was on shift. I'd spent a couple of hours with her, and it was the next time I was on shift, someone said, I think I was trying to talk to her, and someone said, I don't know why you're bothering, she's deaf, or words to that effect.
This person was on a 2-to-1, so you sat with somebody else. Did they not say to you, this person is deaf?
No.
While you were trying to talk to them?
No, only on my second day of being on Willow Ward and being with the patient did someone say to me that she was deaf.
did the person you were sitting with
I've got no idea.
try to talk to her?
No. And I don't know if they knew that she was deaf either, so...
They were the one that told you, though, were they?
So my first shift on Willow Ward, I was sat with the patient at least for an hour, if not two. And I tried to talk to her, and she wasn't responding to me. Fine, you know. And then on the second day, the second time I sat with her, or the second day I was working with her, the person I was sitting with said to me straight away, she's, you know, don't you know she's deaf? Well, no, I didn't know that.
Was this a one-off on your ward, on your shift on the Willow Ward? So the absence of sharing individual risk triggers, symptoms, care needs and safeguarding, was that a one-off?
No, it wasn't. There were other instances that that information wasn't shared.
What other instances?
Okay, so one of the patients that apparently suffered from anorexia, but that was never communicated. And I'd been sitting with her on one-to-ones for quite some time now, and I think there was footage of her being triggered by other members of staff that were making reference to dieting. There was another patient that I was working with, and I tried to engage with the patients and talk to them and make them feel, make them feel valued, try and strike up a conversation. And one of the patients I was speaking to, I was talking to her about her family members, and I said words to the effect of, have you got any siblings? And she said, I have, and said, but I don't see them, because basically she'd been sexually abused by this family member. So had I known that that's part of her history, I wouldn't have gone anywhere near that subject. But having to find out this information from the patients when you're trying to engage with them isn't good for the patients. If you're triggering them by bringing things into a conversation, that can trigger them.
And so, just to be clear then, the sort of absence of sharing of information about individual patients, was that your experience on your shift at the Mental Health Urgent Care Department?
Yes, it was my experience on all the wards.
All the wards. I want to ask you next about handovers. Perhaps we can pull up page 9, paragraph 26 of your statement. You say here that there were no arrangement for handovers to staff. There was also no time to familiarise yourself with patient records as they were computerised. And then at paragraph 39 and paragraph 40, so page 13 of your statement, this is against a background of a patient on the Willow Ward who ligatured on your first day. You say here that the nurse on duty stated during the handover that she had forgotten to complete the risk assessment for this change in frequency of observations. And then at paragraph 40, also on the Willow Ward, your 7th shift on the 25th of April, you say that at handover you found out that that same patient had attempted to ligature again on the 23rd of April 2022. I just wonder whether you can help us with whether there were handovers or not.
So when I mention handovers, I mean the handover from the night duty shift to the day shift. I only ever did the day shifts. So the handover, from my opinion, what I'm meaning to say there is the briefing before the shift, or when you went to take over from somebody sitting on a one-to-one observation, you know, there was no communication, as in, oh, this she's tried to do this, or she's tried to do that, or there was just no flow of information. It was hand you the sheet of paper and then off you go. Sorry, I don't know if I've made that, if that was very clear what I've just said there.
So I think what you're saying is that there were handovers, but they didn't provide you with information about the individual patients.
No, so the brief, if you like, the briefings in the morning where the night duty would have handed over to the day shift nurse, she would then brief us on what had gone on in the evening. There was nothing specific to a patient that, unless something had happened. So what I'm trying to explain is, if you've got 10 members of staff that come in to work, have all those 10 members of staff worked on that ward before? Because there may be an assumption that all the members of staff know all the patients because they're in there every day. I wasn't in there every day, and nor were some of the agency workers. So from my point of view, each patient should have been spoken about, so that throughout the shift, we're all interacting with them on different levels, so we all need to understand what the patient needs, and that was never done.
Was the briefing conducted by the head, the nurse in charge of your shift?
Usually, yes.
So you did not hear whatever was said between the night shift
No.
and the day shift? How long did those briefings last?
Usually about 10 to 15 minutes.
Thank you.
I want to move on to ask you about technology. Were you aware of any technology being used to assist patient observations?
I know that they had, not that it assists it, but they had CCTV on the wards, and they also had some monitoring. Sorry, my screen's just gone off. That I can't remember the name of it. There was a monitoring device which I hadn't been trained on and wasn't aware of until a few shifts into working on Willow Ward, where they had a monitor in the nurse's office that used to bleep, and it was something to do with if there was no movement on a mattress in one of the rooms. That's what I was told, but I was never trained on it, and that's my basic knowledge on it.
Have you heard of Oxyvision
That's
or
it,
OxyHealth?
Oxyvision, that's it, yeah, sorry, that was the name of it.
And so you weren't trained on Oxyvision?
No, I wasn't, and the monitor and all the kind of, I don't know, whatever monitored it was in the nurse's office that you needed keys to get into.
So was it the case that you were asked about whether you had done Oxyvision or OxyHealth training by the nurse in charge on your first day at the Willow Ward?
No, I wasn't asked because I didn't even know it existed.
It was a few shifts later that you learned of it.
I just asked one of the healthcare assistants what's that all about, because it was making a noise, bleeping. Otherwise, I would have just thought it was a CCTV monitor, but it constantly made noises in the office.
And so if it was constantly making noises in the office, was it an alarm, was it?
Yeah, it was like it was a bleeping noise. I really don't know how it worked. It wasn't a very loud alarm, but if you were in that office, you could hear it bleeping almost constantly, making a noise. But I have absolutely no idea how it worked.
And so when you heard this bleeping that you've described, what were the other staff members around you doing in response to the bleeping?
I think they were just carrying on, ignoring it. I didn't even. It was. The noise was constant, so there was no reference to the Oxyvision's activated, we need to go and check on a patient, because, like I say, I wasn't even aware of its existence until some shifts later.
It was in the... You said it was in an office that needed locking. Was it in the computer system? Was it not in the main nursing station?
Yeah,
which
it was
you've
in the...
already told us didn't need a key.
No, it was in the... There may well have been one where the grab bag was. I don't know, a monitor, but in the nursing station where the nurse and the healthcare assistant were based, it was in there.
And that didn't need a key?
That needed a key to get in there. That's the one that needed a key, definitely, but I can't speak about the other one.
So did you see any members of staff using the Oxyvision system at all, or using it to undertake observations, for example?
I wouldn't know what using it, what that would entail, so I can't really comment.
I'd like to ask you on a similar theme about therapeutic observations. You've done the training, you've now done your first shift on the Willow ward. What was your understanding of therapeutic engagement?
My understanding from my, I suppose, from my training and from how I am, I was never given any advice on how to do it, but from my impression was that you are there to supervise, communicate, engage with a patient, and if necessary, intervene should they try and do something that may harm themselves. So I would always try and strike up a conversation with them, just, you know, make them feel that they weren't just being stared at, because that's what I witnessed, was some of the healthcare assistants, the agency staff, just sat there staring at the person and not even talking to them. That can't be right.
And so before you started undertaking observation, so thinking about that first shift on the Willow ward on the 5th of April, was there any process or an opportunity for you to shadow staff before undertaking observations?
No.
Were you shown a copy of the therapeutic engagement and supportive observation policy by staff on the Willow ward when you started?
No, I wasn't, and I wasn't even asked if I was aware of my responsibilities. Bearing in mind, the first shift on Willow ward was the first time that I'd been in that ward. It was my first shift as healthcare assistant, and it was actually myself that said to them, "This is my first shift. Can someone show me round?" Had I not said that, I don't imagine it would have happened. But equally, at no time did anyone check that I was proficient, or I understood my responsibilities and my role as a healthcare assistant on a one-to-one observation.
But you did attend the TASI training, which you say was very good and helpful.
I did, yes. Yeah.
So do you feel that prepared you well then to undertake the observations that you were asked to do on the Willow ward on the 5th of April?
I absolutely agree that it prepared me for my role, and particularly the one-to-ones. However, my concern, which was borne out with what I witnessed, was that agency staff who hadn't had that training probably did not understand their role on the one-to-one observations because of their behaviour. And I think it was mentioned on one of the briefings on Willow Ward. After some time, it was pointed out to staff members that they shouldn't be using their mobile phones, and they shouldn't be falling asleep.
So just putting to one side the other staff and just going back to what you say about undertaking observations, I just wonder if it's helpful. You say that you didn't understand what was required of you. You didn't understand what was required for the observations, the engagement.
What I didn't understand.
Yeah, is that what you were saying? You didn't understand?
No,
what was required?
I understood what was required of me, but my concern was that the agency staff didn't understand what their role was. For me, performing that role was you've got to be on heightened alert. You're there to make sure that somebody doesn't hurt themselves, and that the seriousness of the role, I don't think, was taken into account by the agency staff. And I don't want to say all the agency staff, but as a generalisation, potentially if you're not observant and you're not engaging and you're not switched on when you're performing this role, something serious will happen, as it did.
You've told us that the agency staff, that you had tried to apply to be an agency staff and were not able to do so because you have not got previous mental health experience.
Yes.
So they would have had previous mental health care experience.
Mm-hmm.
And you still think that they did not understand the seriousness of what they were doing, or do you think they just were choosing not to do the job as they should? You may not know because you may not have talked about it.
Yeah, I'm not sure, and I was at a bit of a loss as to how. Firstly, there's going to be a first time for everybody going to, like it was for my first time. There's got to be a first time before you work on a mental health ward, and I was unsure how these agency staff had managed to work on there, because there has to be a first time, and it never became clear to me how they were allowed to work on there, what experience they'd had previously. I did try and kind of speak to a few of them, but I couldn't really get to the bottom of it.
I just wonder if I could invite you to have a look at page 8 of your witness statement, paragraph 22. Just wait. You say there, the second sentence, or the second line on paragraph 22, I was not given any instruction on this and was just handed a sheet of paper with the names and room numbers. I had to seek clarification on what I was supposed to be doing. I just wonder whether, did your training not help you with what you were supposed to be doing?
No, there was focus on the one-to-one observations, which are the highest risk 2-to-1 observations, but it was never mentioned about the checks up to 5 times an hour. So I remember being on my first shift being told, you're doing these checks, and I was like, well, I don't, what have I got to do with these checks? Because it had never been explained to me.
So did you consider it appropriate that you were assigned one-to-one observations with a patient at risk of self-harm on your first day?
I don't think it was wrong for them to do that. But if you're as a medical professional in that environment, my opinion is that you need to know who you have working with you on that 12.5-hour shift. You need to know the skill set, and you need to know that, you know, you're putting somebody's life in the hands of a healthcare assistant, potentially. So I was quite surprised that the head for the shift that particular day didn't really know the staff that they were deploying to perform these roles.
I wonder whether we could just turn then to your evidence that you said earlier before the break. You didn't observe engagement with patients and other staff, carers that were there. That was your experience. You say in your statement at paragraph 27, we can take you to it if you would like, but you say there that the communication style at times combative and unhelpful. I just wonder whether you can help us with any specific examples of that.
Sorry, could I just...
Yes, paragraph 27. It's page 9, towards 3 lines up from the bottom.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I've got it now, thank you.
Can you give us some examples of...
Generally, my experience of this was there would be patients that would sometimes become difficult to manage. And I witnessed on several occasions the style of communication used by some of the staff members to be very dismissive, unhelpful, and lacking empathy. And at times, I would go as far as to say quite aggressive and confrontational. To kind of explain what I'm trying to say is, I did get the sense quite often on probably all of the wards that the patients were treated more like children than adults who just needed a bit of understanding, a little bit of empathy, and a little bit of care. And quite often, because of the pressures of a lack of staff, if there was an incident that had gone on, obviously that takes a lot of resources away to deal with that particular incident. But from my point of view, these ladies just needed a bit of help and a little bit of understanding, a little bit of empathy. And yes, at times they needed to be dealt with in a robust way, because there are rules and there are ways to behave and conduct yourself. And at times I just think that the communication style and the behaviours of some of the staff just made situations escalate when that didn't need to happen.
Yeah, you've already spoken about staff falling asleep whilst undertaking observations of a patient. Did you observe that staff member falling asleep? We can look at paragraph 52, for example, of your witness statement, which I think is page 16. Paragraph 52, page 16, at the bottom of that page. Oh, thank you. The HCA I was working with fell asleep and then it goes only a few hours after the patient she was observing had made a ligature attempt. I challenged the healthcare assistant and told her she couldn't sleep, but the healthcare assistant said it was okay because the patient was asleep. The HCA, the healthcare assistant, said she was tired, had a headache, having been up since 5 a.m. to travel from Stratford, and then you started your shift at 7 a.m. but weren't allocated a break until 4 p.m. And I just want to ask you about the breaks. Were you given breaks during your 12-and-a-half-hour shift?
You were given, I think, it was either 30 minutes or 45-minute break.
Just one.
Mm-hmm.
How often did managers check whether staff on observations were awake and alert?
I personally didn't have any manager come and check on me, or the senior healthcare assistant check on me. And I have to say that if you are doing the one-to-one or the two-to-one observations properly, it's probably one of the most emotionally draining things you can do, to think that you are the person that can stop the person you're watching from either, harming themselves or trying to take their own life. I can't explain how hard that is. And on my first shift, I think I did that for the whole shift. I did constant one-to-one observations. So I was going from one patient to another patient to another patient for a whole hour, and then you've got to kind of, I was talking to them, engaging with them, trying to, let's go for something to eat, let's go out in the fresh air, because you want to make that time for them as pleasurable as possible, I suppose. But I have to say, it is the most exhausting time. I can't put it into words, because you are focused 100% on that. Every time they move, or every time they want to get up, or I was following them, should be following them, to make sure that they're not going to do anything to themselves, because in the blink of an eye, they could have picked something up and tried to tie it around their neck, which happened. Or if they, as happened, go into the bathroom and they're not followed into the bathroom, that's because they know that if they've got a male member of staff, they're not unlikely to follow them in there. And if they want to do something to themselves, that's when they're going to do it, when you take your eye off them, which, it just can't happen.
And so, with this incident with the staff member falling asleep, I think it was a healthcare assistant
Yes.
that fell asleep. Was that a one-off incident, or did you see that happen more than once?
No, I saw that happen regularly. And
How
I was
often?
working during the day, so I wasn't even nights.
How often would you say? Every shift, or?
I think I remember it happening several times on Willow Ward, and it happened when I was on Cherry Down. I don't recall it happening in the Linden Centre, but I was only in there for one shift, and I spent most of my shift there with the lady who had attempted to abscond. But and one shift I came in to Willow Ward, and one of the patients had actually caught the healthcare assistant who was watching her asleep and videoed him asleep, and then came out of her room, walked round the healthcare assistant and went and told the nurse that the healthcare assistant that was supposed to be watching her was asleep.
And did anything happen as a result of that incident or this incident?
Sorry, the incident.
So the incident where on the Willow Ward, where you observed the healthcare assistant falling asleep during the observations, and the incident?
No, not the one involving the healthcare assistant that I was with. When she fell asleep, I woke her up and said she shouldn't be sleeping, and then she didn't do it again, with me anyway. The guy that was the healthcare assistant that was on the one-to-one with the patient who videoed him, I don't know who he was, and I think they sent him home that night, but what happened to him, I've got no idea.
Did you observe that incident?
I didn't observe the one with the male healthcare assistant, but the girl that took the video of him showed me the video when I was on a one-to-one with her and told me about what had happened.
You talk about staff shortages, that there was a reliance on agency staff. When you say that in your statement, you say at page 9, paragraph 24, that the senior staff on duty were aware of this, do you mean the nurse in charge or someone more senior than that, such as a ward manager?
Sorry, could I just look at the
Yes, let's.
statement on that?
So it's page 9, paragraph 24. And it's 4 lines up from the bottom.
Oh yeah, sorry.
The senior staff on duty were aware of this, and I witnessed the perpetrators being told not to fall asleep. As far as I'm aware, they were told not to come back to the ward, but this is something I heard via one of the healthcare assistants. I don't know if anything further happened to them. When you say senior staff on duty, can you help us with who you're referring to?
So there was the healthcare assistants, then there was a nurse, and then there was another medical practitioner, and I can't remember what title they had. They were the senior member of staff on duty, and they were aware of the guy that had fallen asleep, and they'd taken a video. The patient had taken a video of him because she went round and showed them, and they escalated that. And on one of the briefings, we were told not to fall asleep and not to use your mobile phone while you're on a one-to-one, because obviously if you're on your phone, you're not observing the patient. But as to who the senior, what level or grade they were the senior member of staff on duty. I don't, one above a nurse, I suppose, whatever that grade is.
And you say that you, and this is at paragraph 38 of your statement, so that's page 12. Again, this is on the Willow ward. This was concerns that you had expressed about a patient, the patient who had ligatured on the first day on the Willow ward, had been taken off her one-to-one observations. You see that?
Yes.
Was there any process or opportunity for providing feedback for the patients that you were observing at the end of your shift?
So for me to provide feedback to...
Yeah, to another member of staff.
Well, there wasn't like a debrief or anything like that, but on that particular occasion, you know, if I witnessed something I wasn't happy with, I would take it to either one of the more senior healthcare assistants or the nurse. On this occasion, I spoke to the nurse and said that she was still, you know, that particular patient was still feeling suicidal. And nothing happened. She still was no longer on one-to-ones. But then later on, a few days later, she tries to ligature, I believe, from my statement again.
And you say here at paragraph 38 that there was a stool and some curtain hooks that had been left in this same patient's room. and that the patient had informed you that she could use those to harm herself. You removed those items from the room and spoke to the nurse about it. Help us understand whether any of the ligature attempts that you witnessed or were involved in during your shifts. Did you observe any patient's room being searched afterwards, and items being removed, for example?
I did on one occasion, but I can't remember the circumstances. I think it might have been the patient that tried to ligature with her bra. I think it might have been that. But there were things. I suppose it's a balancing act, isn't it? At the end of the day, the room that the patient is in is their home for all intents and purposes, and everyday garments can be used as ligatures. So there's a balance between kind of taking everything out of their room and making them think that they're in a prison cell, and balancing that with trying to keep them safe. So it's a difficult one. But yes, a room was searched when the lady had tied a bra around her neck, and I think that was taken out of the room. But any item of clothing can be used as a ligature. A pair of trousers, tights, bras, jumpers, scarves, anything like that.
But so far as you were aware, you did observe there being searches of rooms?
Yeah, on at least one occasion I did.
I want to ask you about recording of observations. You talk about observation logs in your statement. Did you see other staff complete observation logs? Did you complete observation logs?
So there was like a clipboard when you went to take over from the observations, the one-to-ones or the two-to-ones, and that would have... the way it was supposed to be completed would be kind of a running dialogue, I suppose, of things that the patient does. So patient goes to have something to eat, patient goes to the garden, and any behaviours that may assist somebody taking over on the next stint that might assist them in looking after that patient. But there was very little information on there, to be honest with you.
So you say, and perhaps we can bring this up, page 6, paragraph 15, that each patient on these close proximity observations has a handover sheet that is supposed to complete the forms during the observations, but it was clear due to the lack of detail that these were not completed correctly. Are these handover sheets the same as observation logs, or is that something different?
No, that's the same. It's the same thing, yeah.
And what information was incorrect? Why do you say that?
I wouldn't necessarily say it was incorrect, but it was incomplete. There wasn't the right sort of information. You know, the information on that sheet is supposed to assist in whoever else takes over from you to understand a little bit about what's happening with the patient. So, for example, if the patient's in bed all day and not got out of bed, and generally, I suppose, if they're somebody who doesn't behave like that, that might highlight some risk to the patient. If it's not documented, or they went for something to eat, or they went to the garden, were on the phone, seen what be, all that kind of information helps the person that's coming to take over understand the patient at that particular time, which can obviously change, but it helps you build a picture of how that person's feeling on that particular day. So I just don't think the information was detailed enough to assist.
And you describe an instance of a healthcare assistant showing you how to copy and paste from the night duty entry. which led to the observation levels being recorded inaccurately. That's at page 15, paragraph 49 of your statement. How common was copy and paste record keeping in your experience?
This was to do with the Mobius system, I think. And I asked if someone would show me. So it was at the end of my shift, and I said to one of the healthcare assistants, "Can you show me how this works?" And I logged onto it to see if I could get onto it, and then she was showing me how you update some information on there. So she copied and pasted from the previous entry and then pasted it onto my entry. And when I was reading it to see what it said, the observation levels, she hadn't changed them. And I'm aware from whether it was CQC or other agencies that have highlighted that copying and pasting from other previous records was a common practice and shouldn't be done, but obviously that happened while I was there.
Was that a one-off, or did you see it occur more than once?
That was a one-off, because I don't remember going back onto the system, because I had to literally badger someone to let me into the office that had a key. There was one computer in there that I could use, and then I had to log on to it, at the end of my 12.5-hour shift, to then be able to see what this system did. Because there was no time during the day, because we were constantly on one-to-one observations getting moved around, to actually go and complete anything if it needed doing, any paperwork or administration.
I think we're going to take a short break now. Chair, if we can return at 12:50. Thank you. Perhaps I could ask for page 6, paragraph 17 of your witness statement to be brought up on screen, just to orientate you here and to provide you with the context. You describe at paragraph 17, page 6, the ligature attempt by a patient on your first shift at the Willow ward. And I just want to ask you a bit about that incident. You mentioned earlier that you didn't see any doctor on the Willow ward that day. What about afterwards?
No, I don't recall seeing a doctor. That was my first shift. I think I saw a doctor once, and he was in an office with someone. I don't recall seeing a doctor at all.
And so just in your experience then on the Willow ward, how often did doctors come onto the wards?
I want to say twice a week, but that's not because I observed that. It was just something that was said to me when I questioned how often the patients would see a doctor.
How visible were ward managers or matrons on the ward, on Willow ward, for example?
They would work in the office that the grab bag was in. they would do the handover in the morning or the briefing in the morning, and then I don't really remember having much of an interaction with them, to be honest.
At, again, page 6, paragraph 17, you describe here that same patient with a second ligature attempt on the same day. Was it your understanding that the patient was able to ligature because the male healthcare assistant allowed her to go into the bathroom unobserved? Was that your understanding?
Yeah, absolutely, yes.
Were you aware of any guidance or practice about male staff observing female patients in bathrooms or private spaces?
I was aware that after the incident, the nurse was talking to one of the other healthcare assistants and saying he should have called for for another member of staff, a female, to come while the patient went into the bathroom, which is easy to do, easy to say, but not as easy to do, because how would he have communicated that to somebody, because he sat in the room with them? You know, there was nobody really to communicate with unless someone happened to walk past him.
So there wasn't radios, for example?
I think there were radios, but I was never given a radio. I mean, there was no, when you were on a one-to-one observation, there was no way of you communicating with anyone. If the patient wanted something, then you'd have to wait for someone to walk past you and ask for that to happen, or kind of ask the patient to come with you if it was, if that was appropriate. And if it's an emergency, then if you had a pin alarm, then you'd activate the pin alarm. But like I previously said, not everybody had those.
And so after the first ligature attempt that you describe, was there any debrief that happened amongst staff about what had happened? So
the ligature attempt that I was witnessed was the second ligature attempt that day of the same patient. So the first ligature attempt that day, I didn't witness that because I was on a one-to-one observation. The second ligature attempt, no, there was no debrief. There was just a heated exchange between the nurse and the healthcare assistant and the patient, actually, as well, because the healthcare assistant, who was the healthcare assistant that had shown me around the building or around the ward on my first shift, and was the one who showed me where the ligature cutters were housed, and actually said to me, if you're going to take the ligature cutters, take the whole bag, not just one. And when it came to it, she went to get the ligature cutters, took one ligature cutter, and it was the wrong one, which is why I then went to get the grab bag with them all in it. But there was no debrief. There was no debrief after any of the incidents that I was party to.
And so I don't know whether you're able to help us with this, because as you've described, there wasn't a debrief afterwards, but were you able to get a sense of why the healthcare assistant hadn't followed her own instructions about getting all the ligature cutters?
Oh, I've no idea.
Was there any change in practice after this incident?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
I'd like to ask you next about therapy and what activities, if any, did you observe patients undertaking whilst on the Willow ward or in any of the other wards that you worked at?
There was some kind of craft activity that I was never involved in, but there would be a couple of times on Willow Ward there was a room that was assigned for kind of social gatherings, if you like, and there was like some sort of craft event where they would round up some of the patients and take them in there, and I'm not really sure what they were doing, some like painting or something like that. I'm not. That's the only thing that I was ever aware of.
Did you see any patients taking part in any of those activities, the craft, for example?
I was aware that there were people in there, but to be honest, I didn't pay much attention because I was always busy looking after patients on one-to-ones or doing the rounds. But I did struggle to think that, you know, day in, day out, patients were just, they were either in their room or in the garden. There was a telly in the main lounge area, but there was nothing to stimulate them. They were kind of just wandering around, chatting to one another. There was no interventions. There was no activities for them. It just seemed to be from breakfast to lunch to dinner to bed. That's how it appeared to me.
And you've just touched upon the staffing and the pressures that staff could be under whilst undertaking one-to-one observations, not being able to leave the patient. I wonder if we could just explore that a little bit more. Did you observe in your time working undercover as a healthcare assistant sufficient numbers of staff on duty to respond to an emergency?
Certainly not a Willow ward, no. When I worked on Cherry Down, I would say that they had quite a number of staff there, and this was the kind of the feeling I was getting from working on other wards, that people didn't want to work on Willow ward.
Why was that? What was the difference that you were able to observe between the shift that you did at Cherry Down and the shifts that you did on the Willow ward?
The difference, the main difference being the fact that there were a lot of one-to-ones at Willow ward, and because there were less staff at Willow ward, that meant that you were on one-to-ones for 12 hours because there was less staff there. So it was a self-perpetuating kind of failure, really, because if the staff weren't happy, they could go somewhere else. That was the beauty of working as an agency worker, I suppose. They could pick and choose, as could I as a bank worker. I could pick and choose where I worked.
So there was less staff. That was the main difference.
That was the main difference. It was less staff, and from working on other wards, there were more people on one-to-ones at Willow ward. So the staff didn't want to go to Willow ward because they were on one-to-ones constantly for 12 hours.
You discuss the capacity at the Willow ward in particular. Can you help us, from what you observed, whether the difficulties with the staffing pressures impacted or drove reductions in observations at all?
I believe they did.
Why do you believe that?
Because I can't remember what paragraph it is on my statement, but I'm aware of the patient who ligatured in the bathroom. Some days, probably the following month, I think, some days later, her observations were changed so that she was no longer on one-to-one observations. And I don't think that was driven by her not needing the one-to-one observations. I think it was driven more by the fact that they didn't have enough staff to go around.
I think we can, if it helps, I think that's at page 12, paragraph 38 of your statement. I wonder if we could have that up. Page 12, paragraph 38. This is on the 19th of April, the 5th shift on the Willow ward. You say here that the patient had made an attempt to ligature that you responded to on your first shift, and the patient was taken off one-to-one observations. You were surprised, concerned to discover this. The patient had made numerous suicide attempts, and you'd spoken to her at length about this. The patient told you that she still felt suicidal. That concerned you, and so you informed the senior nurse on duty, but was told that the patient wouldn't return to one-to-ones. Is that the part that you were thinking of? Does that help you at all?
I think does it not go on to say that she, I think on the 23rd of April or the 22nd of April, a few days after that, I think she tries to ligature again.
She does. That's on page 13, paragraph 40 of your statement. But just before we turn to that, here at paragraph 38, you say, it doesn't seem that a further risk assessment was made following my conversation with the patient, and the nurse was happy to take a chance. What do you mean by that?
Obviously, I was employed as a healthcare assistant, but I think if somebody had come to me, as a nurse, and said, the patient has said that they feel suicidal, there needs to be a conversation between the nurse and the patient as to exactly what these feelings are. But to dismiss that when she has previously, tried to ligature on numerous occasions, I was surprised.
But do you know that a conversation didn't take place?
During my shift, it didn't take place.
And do you accept that you're not a clinician yourself?
Absolutely, I accept that.
And that those decisions are made by clinicians? Would you accept that?
I do accept that, yeah.
And so in terms of reductions of observations, I think your answer is that was your impression. Was it something that you assumed?
What, that the
Staffing
reduction,
levels impacted?
Yes, I would say it is something I assumed, but kind of with very good reason. The thing is, when you have a limited number of staff, and that limited number of staff ends up being displaced amongst the one-to-ones, suddenly you've got no one else to look after the other patients that are not on one-to-ones. So if you've got 6 members of staff turn up for duty and you've got 6 patients that need one-to-one observations, you've got no other staff to look after the rest of the patients. So what do you do in order to resolve that? That was what was happening. There were very few staff coming. You've got no one to respond to an incident. So if somebody does self-harm, where are the people going to come from to help you if you've got somebody who's trying to ligature, because all the staff are on one-to-ones, so you can't leave your post. It was a big thing on Willow Ward. I would say that the lack of staff meant that people's observations were getting changed to basically backfill the lack of staff.
I've got 2 more topics to ask you about. Whistleblowing. You mention in your statement that there was one permanent healthcare assistant who told you that she'd been moved to the Willow ward after whistleblowing about another healthcare assistant being abusive to that patient and no action being taken against that person. Was your own experience of the ward culture that staff were encouraged to report poor practice, or did the culture appear to discourage whistleblowing, or did it depend on your status if you were permanent or an agency staff, for example?
I don't think the conversation ever really, I don't think the issue ever raised its head. You know, I have to say that when I was on Willow Ward, it was quite isolating when you are permanently on one-to-ones. You don't get time to interact with members of staff. Obviously you're there to deal with the patients, that's what you're there for, but there is very little interaction with other staff members. The lady that I'm referring to, the healthcare assistant, she would come round when she was doing the 5 hourly checks and talk to the healthcare assistant sitting with the patients. Not everyone would do that. So you were very isolated and you go from one patient to the next, like I say. So you didn't really get an opportunity to interact with other members of staff. So I couldn't, you know, tell you. There's been things I was undercover, so my eyes and ears, I was listening for any information. That was never really broached, the subject of reporting wrongdoing or concerns. It was never really mentioned.
Finally, investigations, CQC inspection, you talk about that in your witness statement. It's at paragraph 36, page 11 and 12. Did you witness any changes to staff practice during the CQC inspection? No, I didn't. I was on a one-to-one again. I think most of the time that was there, but I would go out with my patient to get the fresh air, try and encourage them as much as possible to come out of their room, interact with other patients. And I was aware of a couple of the patients being spoken to by the CQC, and they obviously were voicing their concerns. But I didn't see anyone from the CQC there, and I didn't interact with anyone, and I didn't see any change in behaviour as well while they were there. And what about being briefed at the start of your shift or given any information about how to conduct yourself whilst the CQC inspection was ongoing?
I'm not even sure that we knew that they were coming. I don't remember them mentioning it. They might have done, but it was supposedly an unannounced visit, so I'm unsure whether or not the ward actually knew the day before. I don't know.
Thank you very much. Those are all the questions that I have for you. We're now going to take a break for 10 minutes to see if any call participants have any questions. If there are none, that concludes your evidence, and you'll be free to leave. If there are, some will be back.
Okay.
10 minutes, Chair.
10 minutes.
For you. Firstly, were there any incidents that you found memorable that were not included in the documentary footage?
Several.
Can you tell us about them?
In relation to the whole thing, there was a female patient on the Cherrydown ward, and I had to go. I don't know if I mentioned this in my statement actually. I don't think so. But I had to go to A&E with her. I think I briefly mentioned it.
You do mention it in your statement. Is this the patient that you took to the accident and emergency department because their sugar levels were low?
Yeah. But for me, there was obviously completing my statement doesn't really get across. I think the how much things resonate with you because you can't really express it. So she'd had quite a powerful job, quite a high-powered job, and she'd ended up with some physical health concerns, and then this ended up with her having some mental health issues, and she ended up on Cherry Down ward. And she should have not been there. She should have been at home. But because they had nowhere to put her, they kept her on Cherry Down ward. Now, she had children, and she was going out to Basildon Town Centre on a daily basis. But it really resonated with me, the fact that the only suitable place to keep her was in a mental health ward, where she was witnessing people ligaturing on a daily basis, and was potentially triggering her for her mental health to decline. And obviously, because I wasn't working, I never went back there to that ward. Those sort of things leave you wondering whatever happened to her, because she shouldn't have been there. She'd been seen by the mental health professionals. She'd been given her medication, and she did not want to be there, but there was nowhere else for her to go because she needed to be on in ground floor accommodation. But she was separated from her children. While being in that ward, she should have been at home with her children, and she wasn't. So I don't know if that goes into a bit more detail than the statement. There was another patient on Cherry Down ward in Basildon who was regularly on one-to-ones, not always, but I think that depended on how she was presenting at specific times. And she'd done something quite nasty to herself, which wasn't found for some time, because she wouldn't allow anyone to look at her. She wouldn't let anyone examine her. It was actually to her arm. The lady who absconded from the Linden Centre, I spent a long time with her, talking to her, understanding she'd only come in that sort of the day before or in the evening, and spent a long time talking to her. Those things don't come across in my statement. Several of the patients at the on Willow ward, I got to know them and built up, a good relationship with them, a good rapport with them. And I found it quite difficult to witness patients coming in and basically, it's a hospital, so they're there for treatment. Patients, women who've got children, who've got families, who've got husbands back at home, have had an episode and they've ended up in Willow ward, and they get taken to a room and left. You're in your room, this is your room, this is the toilet, and then they're left. And then lunch is at 12, dinner's at 5, breakfast is at 7. I just found that really difficult to understand how that could be helpful to them. They've been taken away, whether it's by choice because they think I need help, or whether they've been sectioned. They're put into somewhere where they think they're going to be helped, and then they're kind of left. I found that really difficult to comprehend. There was lots of things that kind of I remember, but it depends in what context.
That those were the ones that stood out for you.
Yeah.
I have one more question. You've referred to the CQC inspections, both in your evidence and in your witness statement, and I've asked you about them before we took a break. Given that many of the concerns that you raise appear to have been apparent throughout your shifts on the Willow ward, how obvious do you consider they should have been to the inspectors visiting and assessing the ward? Can you comment on that?
I actually remember having a conversation with one of the healthcare assistants who'd done the whistleblowing, and I said to her that I don't think that they can have really got the gist of how this ward is operating, because I didn't, for one, I didn't see them. They were talking, I know that they spoke to the patients, and I know that they spoke to a couple of members of staff. Who the members of staff were, I don't know. I did know who they spoke to, which patients they spoke to, who weren't particularly backward in coming forward with their opinions on the ward. But the things that I've highlighted about the people falling asleep, people on their phones, you know, the way that patients were spoken to at times, and the way that there was a lack of de-escalation during incidents, unless that happened when they were there. You know, I appreciate that I was only on Willow Ward for, you know, was it 7 or 8 shifts, which is
9 shifts.
Sorry, 9 shifts, and that I went to other wards as well. And you know, that is a very small amount of time spent on those wards in the great scheme of things. But they were there for a few hours, so I don't see that they could have seen how it really was.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Those
you.
are all the questions that we have for you. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
And can I thank you very much
Thank
for
you.
coming to give that.
That's okay. Thank you.
Be back at 2:15.
2:15.